I'm Jack with MK Stunts, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install your new rear sets from MK Stunts on your SF or OG Grom. For this install, you're going to need a ratchet or an impact, a 19mm socket, 12mm socket, 8mm socket, 8mm Allen, 6mm Allen, 5mm Allen. You're going to need a 17mm, 12mm, 11mm, and 10mm wrench, 2 flathead screwdrivers, a Phillips screwdriver, a spring installation tool, and a pair of needle-nose pliers. Additional tools required will be grease, a hammer, 3/8 rod, and an Allen key for the pucks on the foot pegs. In order to do this install, you're gonna have to find some way to raise the back of your bike. If you can't support it, like I have mine supported from the frame, you can use floor jack and jack stands underneath the frame, avoiding the motor mount bolts underneath, which will be used later for the install. Once you have the bike raised up, first thing you're gonna do is remove this 12mm. Remove the bolt for your exhaust. Also 12mm. Do the same for the other side. Note that these rear sets are only compatible with non-linkage style aftermarket shifters. After you remove the bottom bolt and the bolt for the exhaust, loosen the 19mm axle nut till the very end of the threads. Then you'll just give it a nice light tap to push the axle out a tiny bit. Then remove the nut the rest of the way. Release the retainer for the brake light wiring harness. Rotate the rear set and remove. Note, there will be a washer behind the rear set on the axle. It's not necessary, it needs to be removed. With the right side rear set loose, use an 8mm, remove the bolts for the brake master cylinder. If you have snap ring pliers, this would be a great time to use them. But if you don't, this can be done with 2 flathead screwdrivers. Put them in between the opening of the snap ring and pry open. This snap ring will go flying if you're not careful. One side off, work it around, remove the snap ring and the washer. Once removed, the brake lever can be brought up and off of the rear set. Remove the brake pedal return spring and the brake light switch spring. This will take a little bit of effort. Remove the brake light switch. Right side rear set has been removed. Next is to remove the swing arm bolt. Makes it much easier to get everything lined up later if you have a piece of 3/8 rod and a hammer. If you do not, it's okay. The swing arm will fall forward and that will have to be pulled back later during the install. Center it on the bolt to not mess up the threads and lightly tap it to remove the swing arm bolt. When the threaded rod stops, don't hit it anymore. Sounds something like that. This is what it looks like from the other side. With the rod in place, slide the rear set to the end, support the axle, and pull. Remove the washer, remove the bolt, set the rear set aside. First, you're going to want to install the crossbar underneath in this orientation with the larger end towards the front. Using this force applied Allen head bolts, attach this crossbar to the underside of the motor. Stock exhaust may need to be removed in order to do this part of the procedure. At this point, hand tighten only. Do not torque down. At this time, remove both pucks from the ends of the pegs. On the left side of the bike, take your swing arm bolt without the washer, drive it through the rear set. Insert into the swing arm, pull up on the back of the swing arm, and slide it in. Pull up on the swing arm again once you reach this point. On the left side, use the longer of the two spacers and the supplied bolt to the lower part of the rear set. Leave this bolt finger tight. Take the supplied 8mm Allen and nut and insert it through one of your pegs. Get the bolt started in the rear set, put the nut on the back, finger tighten. The factory brake master cylinder is normally located like this. For these rear sets, it must be flipped 180 degrees. In order to do this, release the clip for the brake reservoir line and rotate the line on the master cylinder so that it looks something like this. And reinstall the retainer. Using the supplied Phillips head and hardware, install 2 bolts and 2 nuts onto the right side rear set. Apply a thin coat of grease to the mount for the brake lever and install the brake lever and master cylinder at the same time. Install the 2 remaining nuts. Supplied washer and cotter pin. Bend the cotter pin out and test the fitment of the rear set. Note, it may be required to adjust brake lever height in order to clear the crossbar. If you can't see the bolt hole with the brake lever installed, the brake lever must be lowered in order to clear. In order to lower the brake lever, loosen the nut for the retainer for the brake lever. Using a 10mm wrench, turn the rod to adjust the brake lever upwards. Just this part of the brake lever upwards. Lever height is correct when you can see the hole for the bolt. Once the height is set correctly, remove those 2 nuts for the brake master cylinder. Slip the master cylinder off, and using a Phillips and an 11mm, tighten the retaining bolts for the master cylinder. Reinstall the 2 outside bolts. And again, with 11mm, tighten the 2 outside bolts. Install the brake light spring and sensor. Install the rear set. Install the right side foot peg. And hand tighten the nut on the back side. Using the shorter of the two spacers in the supplied bolt, install the spacer on the bottom side of the rear set. With everything installed, install your axle nut and fully tighten. Next, peg bolts. Using a 17mm on the back side, and tighten the lower bolt. Do the same for the opposite side. Last, tighten the crossbar bolts. Reinstall your Delrin sliders using the same mounting location for the bolt as before. Using your spring installer or needle-nose pliers if you don't have a spring installer, install your foot brake spring. With the bike still off the ground, make sure the rear wheel spins freely and engages when the brake is pressed. And you're done.